Service Teardown HP Pro Tower 400 G10. How to replace the access panel. Removal. Remove the flathead thumb screw that secures the access panel to chassis. Slide the access panel directly back and lift to remove. Replacement. Align the access panel with the edges of the chassis and lower it into position. Slide the access panel forward until the latch snaps in place. Replace the flathead thumb screw that secures the access panel to the chassis. How to replace the front bezel. Before you begin, remove the access panel. Removal. Unlatch the 3 tabs of the front bezel and rotate the bezel away from the PC to remove. Replacement. Align the hooked tabs on the side of the bezel with the chassis and then rotate and press the bezel until the tabs snap over their posts. How to replace the hard drive. Before you begin, remove the access panel and front bezel. Removal. Lift up on the drive cage to release it and rotate it down 90 degrees. Disconnect the HDD power cable from the connector on the hard drive. Disconnect the HDD SATA cable from the connector on the hard drive. Remove the HDD cables from the routing clips on the drive cage. Remove the 4 T15 Torx screws that secure the hard drive to the drive cage. Lift the hard drive off the drive cage and remove. Replacement. Hold the hard drive in position against the drive cage. Replace the 4 T15 Torx screws that secure the hard drive to the drive cage. Reroute the HDD cables into the routing clips on the drive cage. Reconnect the HDD SATA cable into the connector on the hard drive. Reconnect the HDD power cable into the connector on the hard drive. Lift the drive cage up 90 degrees until it locks into place. How to replace the power supply. Before you begin, remove the access panel and front bezel. Removal. Lift up on the drive cage to release it and rotate it down 90 degrees. Disconnect the power supply cables from the connectors on the motherboard. Remove the power supply cable from the routing clips on the drive cage. Remove the power supply cable from the routing clips on the dust cover. Remove the 4 T15 Torx screws that secure the power supply to the chassis. Push down on the green arrow latch and slide the power supply forward to release it. Lift the power supply off the chassis and remove. Replacement. Position the power supply in place on the chassis. Slide the power supply back until the green arrow latch locks in place. Replace the 4 T15 Torx screws that secure the power supply to chassis. Reroute the power supply cable into the routing clips on the dust cover. Reroute the power supply cable into the routing clips on the drive cage. Reconnect the power supply cables to the connectors on the motherboard. Lift the drive cage up 90 degrees until it locks into place. How to replace the RTC battery. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and disconnect power supply. Warning: to avoid personal injury and damage to the product, use extreme care not to puncture, twist, or crack the battery. An internal puncture or rupture to the battery has the potential to cause a short, which may result in a thermal event. Removal. Carefully push in the metal tab on the battery slot until the RTC battery is released. Lift the RTC battery off the motherboard and remove. Replacement. Place the RTC battery in position on the battery slot on the motherboard. Push down on the RTC battery until it clicks in place to secure it. How to replace the speaker. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and disconnect power supply. Removal. Disconnect the speaker cable from the connector on the motherboard. Remove the speaker cable from the routing clips on chassis. Remove the speaker from the two rubber prongs that secure the speaker to the chassis and remove. Replacement. Place the speaker in position on the chassis and secure it to the two rubber prongs that secure it to the chassis. Reroute the speaker cable into the routing clips on chassis. Reconnect the speaker cable to the connector on the motherboard. How to replace the wireless LAN module. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and disconnect power supply. Removal. Remove the P1 Phillips head screw that secures the wireless LAN module to the motherboard. Slide the plastic connector cover off the wireless LAN module and remove. Caution: use care when disconnecting the wireless antenna cable from the WLAN module. A damaged cable or connector can degrade performance. Carefully disconnect the wireless LAN antenna cables from the connectors on the wireless LAN module using tweezers or needle nose pliers. Grasp the wireless LAN module by the sides and disconnect it from the connector on the motherboard and remove. Replacement. Insert the wireless LAN module into the connector on the motherboard. Reconnect the wireless LAN antenna cables to the connectors on the wireless LAN module. Replace the plastic connector cover onto the wireless LAN module. Replace the P1 Phillips head screw that secures the wireless LAN module to the motherboard. How to replace the system memory. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and disconnect power supply. Removal. Release both latches on either side of the motherboard DIMM slots. Lift the system memory module out of the DIMM slot on the motherboard and remove. Repeat this same process to remove any other system memory modules from the unit. Replacement. Place the system memory module in the corresponding DIMM slot on the motherboard. Carefully press down on the system memory module until it locks into place in the DIMM slot. Repeat this same process to replace any other system memory modules on the unit. How to replace the heatsink dust cover. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, and disconnect power supply. Removal. Remove the power supply cable from the routing clip on the heatsink. Flip the rear dust cover that covers part of the heatsink dust cover up. Press out on the two latches on top of the heatsink dust cover, lift it off the motherboard, and remove. Replacement. Place the heatsink dust cover in position over the heatsink on the motherboard. Flip the rear dust cover that covers part of the heatsink dust cover down. Reroute the power supply cable into the routing clip on the heatsink. How to replace the heatsink. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, heatsink dust cover, and disconnect power supply. Removal. Disconnect the fan cable from the connector on the motherboard. Loosen the 4 captive T15 Torx screws that secure the heatsink to the motherboard. Note: due to the adhesive quality of the thermal grease located between the heatsink and processor components, it may be necessary to move the heatsink from side to side to detach it from the motherboard. Lift the heatsink off the motherboard and remove. Replacement. Note: before replacing the heatsink, the thermal grease should be replaced. The thermal grease should be replaced every time the heatsink is removed. Use alcohol and a soft cloth or an alcohol swab to clean all thermal grease off the heatsink and processor. Use the thermal grease applicator to apply the thermal grease to the processor. Align the heatsink with the holes on the motherboard and lower the heatsink into position over the processor. Tighten the 4 captive T15 Torx screws that secure the heatsink to the motherboard. Reconnect the fan cable to the connector on the motherboard. How to replace the CPU. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, heatsink dust cover, heatsink, and disconnect power supply. Removal. Push down on the CPU locking bar and move it to the side to release the CPU cover. Lift the CPU cover to its upright position. Carefully grasp the CPU by the sides, lift it out of the CPU slot on the motherboard, and remove. Replacement. Carefully place the CPU into the CPU slot on the motherboard. Make sure the arrow in the corner of the CPU matches the small arrow on the motherboard CPU slot. Lower the CPU cover over the CPU. Push down the locking bar until the CPU is secure in the slot and slide the locking bar into the locked position. How to replace the motherboard. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, RTC battery, wireless LAN module, system memory, heatsink dust cover, heatsink, CPU, and disconnect power supply. Removal. Disconnect the following cables from motherboard: speaker cable, HDD SATA cable, HDD power cable. Remove the 5 T15 Torx screws that secure the motherboard to the chassis. Carefully lift the motherboard off the chassis and remove. Replacement. Caution: take care not to trap any of the cables between the motherboard and chassis. Carefully place the motherboard in position on the chassis. Replace the 5 T15 Torx screws that secure the motherboard to the chassis. Reconnect the following cables from the motherboard: HDD power cable, HDD SATA cable, speaker cable. How to replace the wireless antennas. Before you begin, remove the access panel, front bezel, heatsink dust cover, heatsink, wireless LAN module, system memory, and disconnect power supply. Removal. Remove the rear wireless antenna cable from the routing clip on the chassis. Press the release tab on the rear antenna cover and rotate the cover off the chassis. Remove the T15 Torx screw that secures the rear wireless antenna to the chassis. Lift and guide the rear wireless antenna cable through the hole in the chassis and remove. Guide the front wireless antenna cable through the hole in the drive cage. Rotate the drive cage back into the up position and remove cable from routing clips. Remove the T15 Torx screw that secures the front wireless antenna to the drive cage. Lift the front wireless antenna and remove. Replacement. Place the front wireless antenna in position on the drive cage. Replace the T15 Torx screw that secures the front wireless antenna to the drive cage. Reroute the front wireless antenna cable into the routing clips on the drive cage and guide it through the hole. Place the rear wireless antenna in position and guide the antenna cable through the hole in the chassis. Replace the T15 Torx screw that secures the rear wireless antenna to the chassis. Align the tabs on the rear wireless antenna cover with the holes on the chassis and rotate the cover against the chassis until it snaps into place. Replace the rear wireless antenna cable in the routing clips on the chassis. Click the Playlists tab in YouTube to find HP videos in other languages, and search our channel to find official HP support videos.